Welcome back to the Hey Coach video series. In today's video, we're answering a question directly from my social media. And this specific coach asked, "Hey coach, I assume women that are in menopause are insulin resistant. He's adjusted her macros 2-3 times and she still has not gone into a fat oxidative environment or improved her body composition. Why is that? Let's go ahead and talk about it in today's Hey Coach video." Go ahead and pull out the whiteboard. Hopefully you all will be able to see this without any reflection. I got some really good information I want to share with you guys today, because the reality is a lot of people are going through this, and a lot of nutrition coaches are actually helping women that are in perimenopause, menopause, or are postmenopausal, and they essentially don't actually know what's going on. So let's go ahead and dive into perimenopause hormones, and more specifically, how do these changes in your physiology actually affect fat mobilization or fat oxidation? So first and foremost, what you have to understand, with men, testosterone is made in the testes. For women, testosterone is made in the ovaries, okay? Now, as a woman's going through perimenopause and her periods become to be more spaced out, maybe once every 2 months, once every 3 months, and then essentially going to being non-existent, the two hormones that are made in the ovaries, very important, are testosterone and progesterone. Now, if you watched my other video about estrogen dominance, talking more about progesterone is probably going to make a lot more sense here. So let's go ahead and let's dive into some of the things with regards to testosterone and progesterone. Now, testosterone is very important for blood cell health, for libido health, for bones, for your muscle tissue, and for reproductive health, okay? Now, as far as progesterone goes, I'm gonna make some really key points here, and I really want these to hit home, because most of the time, if I'm working with a woman that is 46, 47, 48, maybe all the way up into her early 50s, and please be mindful, ladies, that perimenopause starts typically from 48 to 51. Now, if you're only looking at blood labs and you only look at testosterone and progesterone, and then you can take a look at those two things and you can see, okay, well, they may look like they're going into perimenopause, but they're 25, 27, 31 years old, 35 years old. Are they actually in perimenopause? Now, if you want to dig a little bit deeper, you can then dive into looking at follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone and analyzing the health of those two to actually figure out whether or not you're going through perimenopause or not. But most of the women that I'm essentially coaching are a little bit younger than that perimenopausal age, but some of them even think they're going through perimenopause, but it's essentially because they've treated their body poorly for a very long period of time. So be mindful that stress and progesterone cannot live in the same environment at the same level. One has to be high, one has to be low. High cortisol, high stress, low progesterone. High progesterone typically means low stress, okay? So just be mindful of that. As far as testosterone goes, testosterone can also be negatively influenced by a lot of stress on the system, or over dieting, or even utilizing things like birth control, which can negatively compromise both testosterone and progesterone. So let's go ahead and dive in to progesterone. Now, the number one chief complaint when a woman begins to enter perimenopause is, "I get the night sweats." Now, why do you get the night sweats? Well, be mindful that progesterone is important for quality sleep. Now, if you compromise progesterone, what actually happens is that as progesterone begins to reduce, you can become relative estrogen dominant. Now, if you want to learn about estrogen dominance, go back to the estrogen dominance video that I made just a couple of days ago, and you'll learn more about estrogen dominance. But for the sake of this video, progesterone is the calming hormone in the female physiology. So it is required to be able to sleep really, really well, okay? This is also why when women are typically dieting really excessively, they're under a crap ton of stress or traumas, it's really hard for them to fall asleep or stay asleep at night. The second thing is going to be skin health, overall endocrine system function. It's important for that. Bone health, okay? A calming sense of just being, okay? Not being super stressed out, not being super anxious. But as you're going through perimenopause and progesterone begins to decrease, you may find yourself in a position where anxiety actually begins to feel like it's kind of running your life. And obviously we do not want that. A couple of other things to consider is your immune system. So if you find yourself getting in a position where you're getting sick more often, that could be because your calming hormone is out of balance And anytime your physiology is out of balance, your immunity is actually negatively compromised as well. So please be mindful of that. Even if you happen to be in a high stress environment, your immunity can be compromised. Now, for a woman that is not going through perimenopause, but you are having a normal cycle, your natural female cycle can be negatively impacted by high stress, which then decreases progesterone, and that puts you in a position where you could develop hypothalamic amenorrhea, which is recoverable. Now, birth control shuts down progesterone, which can make you estrogen dominant. And again, if you want to learn about estrogen dominance, go check out that other video. But for the sake of this video, it's important to understand that progesterone is made in the ovaries and testosterone is made in the ovaries. So if you shut down the ovaries, which is essentially what happens, you can no longer reproduce. We need to begin to think about what do these two hormones actually do for the female body, okay? Now, I want to talk about metabolism briefly because I think a lot of people have a tendency to want to separate metabolism and hormones as if they're two separate things. They're not two separate things. Everything works synergistically, okay? Think about the engine of a car. You've got a bunch of different pieces and everything needs to be working optimally in order for the car to produce the most amount of horsepower, okay? So the things that we want to be taking a look at are going to be basal metabolic rate, total daily energy expenditure, okay? Thermic effect of feeding, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, and your exercise, okay? Now, I believe that your basal metabolic rate, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, and exercise are all affected by how well your metabolism is actually working. So we know about metabolic adaptation. We know about dieting on really aggressive calories, okay? And then you start to yield some of those side effects from being on a really low calorie diet for a prolonged period of time. Your metabolism actually slows down. So that's why maybe in the beginning of a fat loss phase, you know, during your normal daily walk around the block or your 10,000 steps, you might start off burning 100 calories or something. But then as you become more adapted, that 100 turns into 90, 80, 70, and you just burn less and less over time because your body's trying to make sure that you can survive. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive into what are some complications when we're talking about a decrease in testosterone and a decrease in progesterone and how that can negatively influence metabolism. It can indirectly negatively influence metabolism and calories in, calories out, because typically as people are going through perimenopause, imagine all this stuff being negatively influenced, okay? Your sleep quality, okay? Your nervous system, anxiety. If you feel that way, you're probably not going to want to exercise as much. You're probably going to be less active. You're probably going to be less willing to go out and go to the gym and train and do all those things. If you happen to feel a bit more anxious, a bit more depressed, a bit more stressed because your calming hormone is suppressed, you're probably going to start looking and turning to food. You're probably going to go into a hypercaloric state or start to eat more calories than you're supposed to. And this indirectly can lead to you becoming more insulin resistant. Now, what is insulin resistance in a very easy to understand fashion? Insulin resistance actually occurs in a hypercaloric feeding state, or if you are intaking more than you are expending, and this basically begins to lead to your blood sugar beginning to climb. Now, in an ideal scenario, we're looking for anywhere between maybe a 75 and a 90 fasted blood sugar first thing in the morning. But as you may start to become more insulin resistant, what's going to happen is that you may turn into like 90 to 105. Now, anything 99 or more is actually categorized as being insulin resistant. So therefore, if you're insulin resistant, now the question is, can insulin resistance affect fat loss? Which was the original question that this coach asked. And the question to that is yes, it can. Now, are most perimenopausal, menopausal, and postmenopausal women insulin resistant? I would have to believe that most of them are if they have not catered or adjusted their lifestyle to the fact that their metabolism in and of itself has actually slowed down. Now, let me explain why this is. Two of the most powerful hormones that help to control metabolic rate are testosterone and your thyroid hormone, T3. T3 is the metabolically active thyroid hormone that can essentially dictate rate of metabolism. So if those two things slow down, then is metabolism slowing down? I would have to say yes. So what do we need to do to make sure that we can basically keep up with the adjustments? I think there's two things that you could do. Number one is try to make sure that you're considering all these things here and trying to make sure that you're keeping up with your exercise, you're keeping up with tracking your calories, tracking your macros, keeping up with your movement, keeping up with lifting weights and going to the gym, okay? But if you're doing all those things and you're still not responding, well, why is that? Well, chances are it's because your hormones, think about testosterone and progesterone and estrogen kind of all being in balance, and you feel great. But then think about what happens when you go through perimenopause, which I just talked about. Testosterone and progesterone shut down, which in many cases leads women to becoming relative estrogen dominant, okay? Now, if you're relative estrogen dominant, how does that make you feel? Well, it probably makes you feel a lot like all the negative stuff that I talked about earlier, which is you're suffering to get quality sleep, which the research has shown even a couple nights of very poor quality sleep can actually increase blood sugar. So therefore, you would become insulin resistant just by sleeping less, okay? Now, again, the calm, the nervous system, immunity issues, anxiety, low libido, probably loss of muscle because you're not working out as much, you're not eating as much protein, you're probably eating more crap food. So you have to take all that into consideration. Now, what are some things that you can do aside from exercise? Well, I think it's very important, and I wanted to make sure that we talked about this at the end because this is just kind of like the icing on the cake, guys. Okay, this isn't like you have to do these things, but I think what it essentially does is it helps get you back in alignment with feeling good, okay? So the two things that I would recommend for supplementation for a woman in perimenopause are simple. Number one is going to be a low dose of DHEA, maybe 5 milligrams or 10 milligrams of a really good quality DHEA. Now, why DHEA? Essentially because DHEA, when it's ingested, converts to testosterone and to estrogen, okay? Now, your genetics will dictate where that DHEA goes. For some people, they're gonna send that DHEA down more of the androgenic pathway or the testosterone pathway. And for some ladies who are taking DHEA, they're still gonna send some to androgens, but they may start to send some to estrogens. So if you are maybe or believe you're a high estrogen converter, you may want to implement something like maybe 100 or 200 milligrams of DIM as a means to basically try to slow down that conversion to estrogen. And the number two thing I would recommend is actually what's referred to as a bioidentical hormone replacement therapy supplement. Now, I could recommend something like chaseberry, in which that probably wouldn't be a bad idea. But for somebody that's already in this 48 to 51-year-old range, I really don't want to waste too much time. So I'd probably go with something that's more bioavailable and will probably get in there faster and do the job a little bit faster, which is something like Progon-B or a bioidentical progesterone, okay? So we went ahead and we listed those things out here. And so to wrap all this up, why talk about all this? Why is it even important? Because there are so many women out there right now that are going through perimenopause, menopause, or are postmenopausal that are dealing with all the negativity that comes with low progesterone. I've even seen some of my clients that I work with going to their traditional Western medicine doctor, and their doctor just keeps giving them more and more estrogen, which actually only exacerbates the side effects of estrogen dominance. So what we actually have to do is, in many cases, we got to bring some testosterone back up. Okay, we got to try to bring some progesterone back up through the supplementation that I mentioned. And oftentimes the side effects that they're experiencing can be massively improved over the course of just 4 to 8 weeks. Thank you so much for checking out this video. Thank you so much for asking this question on my social media. Holy cow. And if y'all have any questions for me, please just feel free. Go to my social media. It is at William_Grazione. Send me a DM, ask me a question, and I will jump on here, draw it up on the board, come on here and provide you guys with some value to take that information and immediately go into your own life and start to create change. Thank you so much for your time. God bless you. We'll see you in the next Hey Coach video. Peace.